What are we talking about when we talk about a movement practice?
The dictionary definition is the action or process of moving or of changing place or position. But what we really mean when we say I study movement is that we endeavor to study all the different ways that we can move rather than specific scenarios or disciplines. I made a list of all the most challenging disciplines I've studied over the years. And I asked, what is the most fundamentally important and limiting capacity in this sport, excluding the sport-specific movements themselves? I then consolidated that list until each attribute had unique aspects not fundamentally represented within any of the other axes. This leaves us with 16 fundamental axes of movement. So we have 4 axes that correspond to the hardware in a computer and 12 that would correspond to the software or the operating system. The hardware axes place some limits on the theoretical capabilities of your body. You can have extremely developed hardware and be a horrible mover, and you can be a great mover with pretty terrible hardware. But if you want to be really good or just develop yourself intelligently, hardware development is very important. The 4 hardware axes are strength, how much force you can produce in various positions and ranges. How much can you squat and deadlift through a full range of motion? If I grab your head and pull on it, can your core generate the necessary forces to resist me? Are you gonna crumple to the floor like a twig? Or is it gonna feel like I'm trying to pull on a 3-foot thick concrete pillar like my old judo instructor? And are you strong everywhere? Or only when you're set up to bench press a laser-aligned 28mm barbell? Note that functional expression of strength has a large neural and technical component, but for strength as a hardware axis, think of the fundamental maximum force that your muscle tissue can produce at your maximum voluntary contraction. Second is mobility, what ranges of motion and positions you can access. There's an overlap here with strength, as a lot of positions given a certain body weight will require a certain amount of force to access. A lot of you use mobility as an excuse for why you're bad at or can't do certain movements. And while that's generally not the case, if you're, say, a dancer with great mobility, not only can you have much greater theoretical access to a variety of movements and positions, you can also do things like just stand and lift a leg, and suddenly it's beautiful and impressive. That's a great tool to have. Third, cardio, your body's ability to do work over a sustained period of time. This is mainly limited by your body's ability to deliver oxygen to the tissues. And there's some evidence that it's specific to the type of exercise you do. For complex movement tasks, cardio will rarely, if ever, be the issue. But having good cardio will allow you to accumulate more practice, make training less stressful on your body, and may aid recovery. Fourth, resilience, the loads and volumes you can handle without pain. You would think that resilience is all about having thick tendons, muscles, and dense bones. But remember, as we discussed in this video, pain is fundamentally an output of the brain. Hence, your nervous system essentially needs to be comfortable with all the parameters of loading for you to really be resilient. Still, like strength, I think there's a value in treating resilience functionally as a hardware axis, especially as it's often far more of a bottleneck than the rest of the hardware axes. The software axes are usually far more limiting than the hardware in movement. They are 1, footwork, how well your feet can organize your body and its movement through space. Ever hear someone talk about getting caught flat-footed? That means that at a critical moment, they were caught with both feet flat on the floor, unable to quickly respond. Good footwork is the polar opposite, your feet intelligently organizing beneath you to facilitate quick and effective movement wherever you need to go, whenever you need to go there, or to balance, stabilize, and produce force to keep you where you need to be. Somatics, our awareness of and control over our internal environment. Somatics is arguably the most important axis of movement training because for most of us, this is where your training really feeds back into the rest of your life. There's a certain state that's optimal to fight and a certain state that's needed to dance with a partner. These two could be seen as different extremes within a spectrum. If you switch the two, even just for seconds, you're either going to traumatize your dance partner or your opponent is going to beat the living daylights out of you. Certain states are optimal for certain tasks. Balance, stillness, strength, reactivity, partner, and oppositional tasks all require different states. And an important focus of your somatic training is the ability to drop into the optimal state for the task and maintain it or create it within different environmental context or pressures. Maybe that means you need to learn to fully clear previous failures with every handstand attempt. Maybe you learn to find the dance even when people are watching. Maybe you learn when to push and how to actually rest, or when you're just being lazy. Maybe it means you need to learn how to keep showing up for something day after day, how to set aside your ego when you're already good, and hold on to your confidence when you're failing repeatedly. I honestly believe some of these things can only be deeply learned through a movement practice. Next, explosive force production. The coordination to generate large amounts of force quickly from many different vectors. Separate from the actual force your muscle tissues can create, there's a certain type of coordination necessary to generate huge amounts of force in a short time. I'm talking about shooting off the blocks in the sprint, the triple extension in a clean, rotational forces in a punch, throw, swing, or kick. The ability for this coordination seems to be a bit of its own thing. For instance, I've been completely enamored with the abilities of dancers over the last few years, and yet, categorically, while they'll chew up new movements like I eat grains of rice, they often seem fundamentally incapable of finding this coordination. It's outside of their scope of practice. Motor digestion, the ability to see, understand, digest, then recreate movements with accuracy and speed. If you go to a beginner dance class anywhere in the world of almost any style, they aren't going to give you 2 moves to learn and an hour to do it. They're going to give you 10, 20, 30 moves or more in that same hour. And you're going to have to process rapidly what those moves are and how to recreate them in your own body. How quickly, easily, and accurately can you do that for movement in a variety of disciplines? There's such an enormous spectrum of ability here, I shit you not, most professional dancers could hit a level of quality in 30 seconds that a novice would struggle to match after a month of dedicated focused training on a movement neither of them have ever seen before. I once taught a dance teacher how to snatch from scratch in 20 minutes. Most people take closer to 6 months to do a decent job. That's the power of motor digestion. Interfacing, configuring your positioning and relationship to or with your external environment. There's enormous complexity in how we can interface with objects, people, or the environment we live in. In contact improv, how can I configure myself with another person so that when they lift me, I feel lighter? Or so that I can make all of your movements easier and more accessible? In grappling, if I have you pinned beneath me, how can I configure our connection so that it feels like I weigh 1,000 pounds, have grips like hydraulic grappling hooks, and find a configuration that eventually eliminates all of your movement possibilities? If you're climbing, how can you configure yourself so that you can use the tiny protrusions in the rock like a ladder? Balance, the ability to or prediction of keeping weight stable over support points. I truly believe that the single most important rule for movement is that balance is keeping the center of mass above your base of support. There's no sport or discipline in which powerful, expressive, beautiful, or functional movements can be performed without control of your balance. When you understand the simple rule, it's easy to apply it. The base of support is the area bounded by your support points on the floor. Anytime you fall or lose your balance, it's because your center of mass left your base of support, or vice versa. So in something like hand balancing, where your base of support is fixed, it's all about rebalancing so that you can keep the center of mass within that fixed base. Or in something like slacklining, where the base of support can move, now you need to find a way to keep the base of support stable under the center of mass. Note that in something like climbing, where you're often hanging, if your center of mass isn't below your anchor points, the same rule applies. Gravity is still there, but it will now create a swing towards your grips rather than a fall away from your support. Balance gets even more interesting when you start working against other people. We can do things like Tai Chi push hands and try to off-balance a partner with a fixed base of support, in which case the opponent is balanced on 2 feet, and the base of support will basically be rectangular, with one edge basically the width between their feet, and the other edge basically the length of their feet. The physics tells us that the easiest directions to off-balance the opponent will be parallel with the plane of the base of support, since up and down forces have no fundamental effect on balance, and perpendicular to the long edge of that rectangle. Same rule applies when we're grappling or fighting in general, but now the opponent can move their base as you try to off-balance them. Now you have to think about their current base of support and their future base of support. So if I push or pull you in any direction, can I move your center of mass farther than you can move your base of support? Generally, you're going to be much more effective by eliminating their ability to move their base in the direction you're going to take them. Then, all you need is a small little push, and gravity will do the rest of the work for you. Orientation, awareness of and comfort in the body's positioning relative to the external environment, particularly while in flux and for extended durations. You're probably sitting up or standing right now, and you know exactly where you are, where the floor and ceiling are. But what happens if I put you upside down? Do you still know where the floor is? What if you roll between these 2 orientations over and over and over again? Will you maintain your awareness of orientation throughout, or are you going to get vertigo and puke on the floor? The body has various tolerances of rotation in each axis, and they can all be trained. This can be all fun and games, and I love how skill here allows you to accumulate more practice in a variety of rolling or acrobatic elements. But if you've had a serious concussion, it's suddenly not so funny anymore. And if you're working on adding twists to your double backflip, maybe it's a matter of life and death that you know where the floor is, even with such an insane change in orientation. Remember when Simone Biles got the twisties years back and everyone was furious about how she took a few events off? That was exactly this. And I'd love to see any of those keyboard warriors doing a triple twisting double backflip. Musicality, the ability to sense and express the characteristics of music, particularly rhythm, through movement and vice versa. Everyone knows someone with no rhythm. We often associate that with footwork and dance, but rhythm can be found everywhere. Can you control the rhythm of a boxing match and break it when and how you choose? When you have a pattern, can you double the rhythm or cut it in half? Can you compartmentalize it and have different parts of the body running different rhythms? There's a more abstract quality to musicality as well. Can you express a song through your movement? Not just the rhythm, but the sentiment and emotionality. This is bidirectional as well. Often certain sounds and vocalizations can be very helpful to the learning and performance of movement. Go to any dance class and you'll hear an assortment of various It sounds kooky, but there's a good reason for it. It f***ing works. I spent a month training with the Ferris Enemy Terra Nova crew this summer in Berlin and then London. And they would often show us a pattern, and we'd all struggle with it. And then they'd ask us, who has the song of the movement? And someone would come up with it. A completely novel song that we had never heard, but it captured some essence of the movement we had all seen. And you could tell if it was perfect or even slightly off. And then, when we had it right, we'd all use the song while we practiced. And you wouldn't believe how helpful it was. A certain essence of any movement can be captured with sound, and finding it will help your performance and learning of the movement itself. Ask anyone who does Muay Thai. Fine motor control, the ability for detailed control and coordination of small movements and forces. At a biological level, a single motor nerve controls between 1 and 1,000 muscle fibers. Groups of nerves and their corresponding muscle fibers are called motor units. And the coordination and calibration of these smaller motor units are very important as they allow us to produce very nuanced and precise movements. This could be writing, painting, or drawing. It could be archery, spinal waves, rod equality, or shooting free throws. Subtle articulations of the hands, fingers, and toes are all important. You don't want to be that powerlifter with clubs for hands. Softness, the ability to dissipate or transmit forces, tension, or impacts. Often, too much muscular engagement can get in the way of what you're actually trying to do. For instance, if I want to throw something, but I keep the muscles of the arm engaged the whole time, it's going to get in the way of the forces I've generated at the feet and the hips. That's one type of softness. Another is with impacts. If I'm falling or rolling, there's a certain type of coordination I can use to soften, if not nearly eliminate, the impact when I hit the floor, so that I can do it over and over again comfortably, beautifully, and without injury. Finally, there's another softness that allows you to dissipate forces. If we play Tai Chi push hands and you push me, but I just stay rigid and flex everything, that's actually gonna make it very easy for you to just knock me over. There's a softness you can find that will dissipate that push so that that kinetic energy doesn't get transferred to my center of mass. Same in jiu-jitsu actually. If I'm passing your guard, if you frame on me and just push me away, if I just tense everything and try to fight you force on force, I'm gonna waste a ton of energy. And if you're even half decent, you're gonna get your guard back. When someone frames on you, there's a certain softness that you can find to dissipate those frames and work around them. People talk about how getting pinned by high-level grapplers feels like they're under a wet blanket. You try to push a wet blanket away from you, and it's just never gonna work. That's a certain type of softness, even in a combative setting. Elasticity, the ability to generate lightness, quickness, and reactivity in the body. There's a certain quality that can be found to the body such that it can effectively store and release kinetic energy. When you have this quality, you can use it to bounce and create the illusion of lightness as a foundation for extremely quick movements and general athleticism. It's not strength, as powerlifters lack it. And it's not weight, as I've seen hordes of people no thicker than a fishing pole who can somehow manage to walk, run, and dance with the elasticity of a mountain troll. It's at some level a unique axis that I suspect is mostly controlled at a neural level. But some of this also comes at a tissue level. The most common protein in the body is collagen because it provides our cells and connective tissues with structural strength. But elastin is another important structural protein that, you guessed it, provides connective tissues with strength as well as a more elastic quality. And we know as we get older, the ratio of elastin to collagen in our tissues tends to decrease. And this may be one reason why people tend to lose this elastic quality as they get older. A lot of this may have to do with the stretch shortening cycle as well, but we won't get into that much here. Finally, research. The ability to refine or generate new movements, particularly with respect to a given function or task. How you approach refining or creating movements or movement tasks is a separate skill from how good you are at doing them. How do you modify a move to work best for you in different environments? How do you work to create new movements or find new connections between old ones? How do you take a move that sucks and make it beautiful and effective? As you can imagine, just like motor digestion, this is an extremely important meta skill, and hence, I like to have people start developing it even from day one. Simple example, find as many ways as you can to get to the floor from standing. In every field, there are people who reach an incredible level by copying the exact prescription of those who came before them. And there are those who innovate and create new material. Don't bother reinventing the wheel, but if you're not creating anything new, maybe you should start. These are the 16 axes of movement. It's not meant to be an end-all be-all definition of movement so much as a guideline for important areas of development and movement and the delineation between movement and fitness. Check out my Intro to Movement series here, our channel memberships, or come train with me in San Francisco. Have a great day.